Good morning, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity. Thanks to the organizers, yes, Kenya, and for the rest of you for making the time to come and listen. This is the hardest slide that I came up with, that is figuring out what the title is going to be. But essentially, we are trying to look at how the discussions around the regulations, the market conduct regulations are going to affect the Fintechs, the digital credit lenders, their businesses, their operations, and basically where they are now and where they will be in case those regulations are implemented. But if there's any takeout, the main one really is that in a regulated regime, what has been so far put down is that the fines are very steep, so don't be on the wrong side of the law. Okay, so I've already talked about the objectives of what this paper is about. So we will first look at business as it is today with the Fintechs, and then if we apply the regulations, how will that business be affected? And what we did was a phone survey of a few selected Fintechs, plus what we know is how they operate based on what is in the media and our understanding of how the products are designed and how Kenyans interact with those products. And then used a tool which is a 4-feet canvas for dissecting through these products, the service deliveries, how the business models are designed, and see where they're coming from as Fintechs in terms of their costing, the pricing, the advertising, the communication, and where the regulator is coming in and how the regulations will impact. So we start with the current state, and this is a 4-feet canvas, which is basically we're using it to dissect the different solutions, and we are looking at the 4 broad areas: the market, the product, the model, and the channel that they use. So on the market, the main thing really I need you to take out is that 90% of Kenyans earn 30,000 shillings or less. And let that always be at the back of your mind as you're going through the discussions. Now, that is very important because when you look at the amounts that are lent out on average, which is 1,500 to 10,000, which has been reported by various media, the different providers, you find that it's a substantial portion of the income. And 36% is what is preferred, and that is for the US. I want to believe that in Kenya it's even less because, again, research has shown that from the income that a lot of Kenyan families earn, a lot of unanticipated needs just always spring up. So suddenly there's a harambe that you need to go into your budget and remove money from. So that really puts pressure on the debt to income ratio. And we're talking about micro. In our minds, in absolute terms, they are small figures. But when you look at it relative to the earnings, really it's a big portion. It's a big portion that impacts on the ability of the borrowers to repay. It impacts on the stability, the financial stability, because there's a lot of social influences that spring up and affect the family budgets and so on. And true enough, this is a research done by FSD. True enough, when you look at digital credit and the responses from the market, there's a lot of all these influences on the stability. For example, lost my source of income, there was a poor performance of the business, all the money went to basic needs. Those are some of the responses. Just point to the fact that Kenyans are really stretched in terms of income, and once you put the burden of them to service a loan, then you have very little leeway in terms of them being stable and the ability to repay. So that's so much about the market. Now, as far as the product is concerned, we find that a lot of them charge interest rates, and they range between 5% and 25%. The channels are mainly through mobile apps and USSD, and also there's a lot of advertising. And the advertising has a component which is a call to action, so which is like to induce the recipient of the ad to take an action, which is mainly either to download the app or to take a credit. So when you look at all this together with the model, and the model is a bit interesting, and at some point I'll dwell a bit more on the model to get the rationale behind why a lot of the fintechs have structured their business models the way that they have. But the effect of that is when you try to look at the fit, for example, the market and the product, we find that a lot of people are stuck in the debt cycle. Because even when you think an amount like 5,000 or 2,500 may look small, but in terms of the DTI ratio, it's a big portion of the budget. And once it's removed from the monthly income, and then it's supposed to be paid in full at the end of the month, clearly the person will struggle to service that loan. So the most, and this is a lot of suspicion, I think some of the research is alluding to this, that people borrow to repay, end up borrowing again to repay, and they end up getting stuck in that cycle. And the point is, someone could have started very well in terms of the income, and then just something happened along the way in terms of their stability, lost a job or something, and suddenly they're in a situation where they are struggling. Okay. I think something happened, job. Okay, we're back, okay. Okay, so it's okay, I'm good. So on the model and the market, generally this is the standard model across all the fintechs that we interviewed, and it's more like the norm, the business norm. So what happens is you have a funnel, and at the beginning you have, you just trust whatever you did in terms of data analytics and whatever scoring that you did, you just trust that the person you're lending to, who you do not know much about, you don't know how much the income is, you don't really know, you may have an idea from the data analytics, you don't know where the person stays, you don't know about the family setting, you absolutely have very little knowledge and information about this borrower. So you just trust that you will give them a loan, and to cover yourself, you'll start small. So what happens is people graduate as they repay, and the performance of the repaying improves. They graduate to higher and higher ticket loan sizes. Now it's a bit of a paradox, because on one hand, it's in the interest of the fintechs for the people to take higher ticket loans, because then they have a higher margin, which they can use for taking care of the bad loans on one hand and for the operations on the other. But at the same time, you're putting pressure based on the DTI. So the more the people earn, the closer they get to a point where they start struggling in terms of their ability. And this also we saw with one of the surveys that we did. One of the respondents, was that for the lower ticket, they have very low NPLs, and as they graduate, the borrowers to higher ticket, then the NPLs start coming in. So typically this is a cost model. It has all these things, and different fintechs, some are very heavy on data analytics and some are not. Some are very heavy on the technology, and so that varies. So whatever it is, there's a component that they need to use to carry the potential bad debts of the non-performing loans. So it is in the interest of the fintech to try and take the good borrowers up on a graduated scale as fast as possible to be able to build up that float to be able to take care of the other burden that they have. And really that's the mindset of the fintechs to a large extent. Just the other part, then we'll go very quickly to the regulations, is on the part of the advertising. Because in the funnel you need as many potentials to come through your funnel as possible. So the advertising is quite aggressive, quite smart. It has a component of inducement, which most of it is on instancy. So most of the service providers will give you or promise to give you a loan within minutes, within 5 minutes, or instantly. And the whole idea is to push as many people as possible. Instant rewards from a psychological perspective is a tool that has been used very effectively in advertising. And then lastly, when you look at the relationship between the model and the channel, we find what I just mentioned. The more you try and push your good pairs to take higher tickets so that you can get more revenues from them, the more you enter into a zone where there's a higher probability that they will default. And these numbers actually validate a lot of what we've been talking about. This is 1.5 years ago. This is a figure from Microsave. There are 2.7 million at that point in time. There's some people who say that the figure has increased, have fallen through the cracks. And for whatever reasons, argument is that there's a problem in terms of the perfect fit of the market, the product, the channel, and the model as it is today. But as it is in innovation, it's about tweaking and tuning to get it right. And it is my hope and expectations of the fintechs actually working hard, looking at their data and tweaking and adjusting their offerings. So that is how things are today, and how will the new regulations affect. So still going back to the 4 buckets of the 4 feet canvas, the main areas that the market conduct that have been suggested, the bill, touches on the contracting, the advertising, and the pricing. And as far as the market product fit, initially it was all about it's instant, and you're lending to somebody you don't really know about. So the regulator is coming in and saying, wait a minute, or the potential regulator, we need you as a fintech to know your customer, you know a lot more about what they do. And they've brought in some prohibitions, like there are certain people you cannot lend to, like you cannot lend to people who are not employed, you cannot lend more than people earn in terms of current and potential earnings. So the idea of responsible lending in general. Contracting obligations, there's a pre-contract, there's a quotation, there's a contract. They're talking about a period of time between when there's a first contact and when the contract is going to be signed. So effectively removing the instancy. So all these get a loan instantly in 5 minutes, within minutes, now is probably going to go out. So it will affect a lot of the advertising. We're now on the products channel. The advertising, again, there's, as we saw earlier, there's the information part of the advertisement and there's the inducement part. And the regulation is suggesting that there should be no solicitation, no inducement as far as advertising is concerned, which is a total shift from the way the thinking is today. When you look at the model and the channel fit, Again, we saw that the more ARPU you try to get from your customer, the more pressures there are. In a certain way, the regulations will actually help with this, because now you slow down in terms of who's coming into your product funnel. You'll get better quality people coming in, and that will reduce, I expect, a lot of the data analytics, the accuracy, the quality of people graduating, and hence less pressures on the cost of the operations. So I feel that's a good thing in terms of slowing down, removing the instancy, removing the very aggressive advertising. And then when you look at the model market fit, there's going to be a pressure on the fees. There's a limit in terms of how much you can charge. And again, while that protects the consumer in terms of the fees and the transparencies associated, it also just changes the whole business model of the fintechs. And for me, this is really an opportunity for changing and adapting, as opposed, so a lot of the feedback we got was that the regulations are going to kill us, but I look at it differently in terms of, it's a different business, it's going to be a different business, you just need to readjust and change and adapt. So my clock tells me my time is up, so thank you.